We're having a hard time getting going already this morning. Moving up to the east side, that's good. Okay, so we've been talking about prayer, obviously, thanks to Debbie reminding us of what we're doing. And
Impediments to prayer.
I'm sorry?
Impediments to prayer.
Impediments, yes, that's right, not appendages. All right, impediments to prayer, and impediments to prayer have been what? What are those impediments?
Wishful, cynical.
Being cynical, what'd you say, Terry?
Wishful
Wishful thinking, oh, okay, yeah.
Magic.
yeah.
Magic.
Do you also
yeah.
talk about secularism, having a way, having to bring your own world from your own
You
standpoint?
mean syncretism?
No, secularism. You know,
Oh,
like
secularism, yes, yeah, yeah.
yes.
Okay, yeah. And secularism is what?
Well, that's another side.
Well, that's the result of it. What is secularism?
It's a way of viewing your world from your own standpoint, from your own view, like seeing the world from your
Worldly
own
point of
perspective.
view?
Yeah, from a worldly point of
Now,
view.
my own standpoint could be a Christian point of view. So I have to understand that secularism is, if I indulge in that, then I look at it from the world's point of view. All right, so we've also been talking about that. We talked about
Syncretism.
syncretism. Yeah, and what's
Where was the
syncretism?
word? I couldn't remember that.
What's syncretism?
Syncretism.
It's like making the two blend.
It's
Trying to
taking
blend the
from
world
different
together.
parts of secularism or other religions and incorporating that into your faith. And trying to synchronize it all. It's basically trying to have everything, all your Josh, what am I trying to say? Cake and eat it too. Yeah, that's very good. Okay. So God is separate from his creation, and let's look at Proverbs 8:22 through 31.
So we're doing two cameras today, that one and this one? Okay.
You want me to do this?
Yes. Proverbs 8:22
The Lord brought me forth as the first of his works before his deeds of old.
through 31.
Oh, 31. I was appointed from eternity, from the beginning, before the world began. When there were no oceans, I was given birth. When there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains were settled in place. Before the hills, I was given birth. Before he made the earth or its fields, or any of the dust of the world, I was there when he set the heavens in place, when he marked out the horizon on the face of the deep, when he established the clouds above and fixed securely the fountains of the deep, when he gave the sea its boundaries so the waters would not overstep its command, and when he marked out the foundations of the earth. Then I was the craftsman at his side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence, rejoicing in his whole world, and delighting in mankind.
Okay, so what's all that mean?
That God is separate from his creation.
It is. God is separate from his creation. Understand what's he talking about?
Wisdom.
Yes, he's talking about wisdom. Wisdom is something that the Lord possessed at the beginning of his work. And it's something that followed all of his creating, everything. And wisdom is something that we attain, and you can have worldly wisdom, or you can have godly wisdom. And godly wisdom, what's the difference between the two?
Can you repeat the question?
Worldly wisdom and godly wisdom.
Yeah, what's the difference between worldly wisdom and godly wisdom?
Worldly wisdom is
Nice, Bob. Night and day, I like that. Yeah. I'll let you all fight over
you want it in 2 words?
it. Sure, or less.
Greek and
Okay.
Jesus. The Greeks were intellectual,
Yeah.
and they thought, and you see that today a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, because the scripture says the Jews seek a sign and the Greeks seek wisdom. But what is the difference
Oh,
between
sorry, I
worldly
didn't give you
wisdom and godly wisdom?
Okay, I'm just guessing.
Okay.
Worldly wisdom is more like what we feel is right, what feels like logical to us.
Okay. All right. So far, so good.
Oh, good, thank you.
What seems logical to us, what seems to feel good to us, which seems to fit our agenda. Now, what's godly wisdom?
We don't know
That's true, maybe. But you think about Abraham, he talked about Abraham this morning, he talked about what Sarah suggested that he do, and then he did it. Is that godly wisdom or is that worldly wisdom? Worldly wisdom says to go with whatever the flow is. He said he did nothing. He did not speak up against this idea, and so he just followed suit. So that's worldly wisdom, is just to go along with whatever. And to do nothing, to speak nothing, to be politically correct, to keep it to yourself. Okay, your God is private, keep that to yourself. I have my God, and I have my way of thinking about God. This is worldly wisdom. Godly wisdom says what?
Well, his ways and his thoughts are much higher than ours, so
Okay.
as we seek him for wisdom, then we allow him to actually operate and to lead versus what we may intentionally be thinking that we should do.
Okay, so what is it you read this morning in Proverbs? What's that
Trust
text?
in the Lord with all your heart.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean on all your understanding. Oh, lean not on your understanding. And in all your ways acknowledge yourself.
Yep.
In all your ways acknowledge what?
Yeah.
Okay. And then he will lead you down a straight path.
Straight or straight?
Straight, S-T-R-A-Y-D.
Yeah.
Is that what it says?
No.
What does it say?
Straight.
He'll what?
He'll direct each step.
He'll direct each step. And this is godly wisdom that says, I will let this go. It's godly wisdom that says, no, I won't follow that way. It's godly wisdom that says, I'll wait. If God made the promise, then I'll wait instead of me, which is worldly wisdom says, I need it now. Godly wisdom says, wait. And so if it never comes to fruition in this world, in this time, in our lifetime, what does it matter? That's the question. If it doesn't come to fruition in this time, in our lifetime, what does it matter? If what we're asking for,
Oh,
if what we're having to wait on, what if it doesn't, what does it matter if it doesn't come?
Yeah, so what am I to do then?
Well, that may be the case, and that, what else is it?
Our intentions,
Okay, our intentions are,
hopefully pure.
hopefully, like the hopeful part, okay? If Christ has promised to return and we're waiting for it, and what we're asking for in this world never happens, what difference does it make? Because Christ is coming anyway, and it will all change anyhow. It's all going to change.
I was going to say something like that.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, we'll find out what it means or why it was important or not important when we get to heaven.
Okay. Or we may not even care once we get there.
Right.
We think in this world we're going to have a lot of questions we'll have before God, and somebody made a joke yesterday about how long you think that line is.
Oh, in heaven, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. There's, when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask God.
We're supposed to be
Yeah.
worshiping, just singing out worship to him all day long when we're in
Yeah.
heaven. So how are we going to have time to ask God?
I don't have any idea. And when you consider the scriptures saying, well, and John talked, he says that I saw a multitude that no one could number. Now you imagine having a multitude that nobody could number, and all these people thinking they're going to have questions to ask of God. You see, this is worldly wisdom thinking that it's going to be that simple. It's not. And it says, you will be known, as you know him, you will know. So everything that needs to be known will be known. And the questions that we have to ask here may be irrelevant.
Right.
Might not even remember.
May not even be an issue at all.
We may not even think of them.
No.
Where is that scripture that you just quoted?
Heck if I know. I gotta think about it a minute. You got it, Tracy?
No.
Okay. So there's, perhaps I'm misquoting it, who knows? I'm probably right. I'm rightly dividing the word of truth.
Yeah.
So he's talking about wisdom throughout this text. And yes, God is separate from his creation because his wisdom is separate from creation. Because it's his wisdom, it's not ours. Oh, Margaret. So and because he's separate, his wisdom is separate. And so it doesn't even think in terms of the world and the way the world thinks. So how did David see it? Psalm 8, 3 through 4. He says, when I look at your heavens, the works of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him? You know, David had no clue as to just how vast the universe is. And we were talking about this yesterday in men's Bible study, is that the stars are like I just say you got billion, trillion, something, and then it gets a centillion. And that's like there are like 100 centillion stars. You can't even number them. And this is just what they know. And that only goes so far, because the Hubble can only reach out so far and see just so much. And so we're like this little tiny ball in the middle of this galaxy, and the part of the Milky Way that is insignificant, and that when the Mars rover was going out, they asked it to turn around and take a picture of the Earth. And when it did, you could barely see it.
And yet here we are.
And here we are. And we're so tiny and so insignificant, and yet God is mindful of us. And if he were part of our creation, would he be mindful of us?
You couldn't see the forest for the trees.
That's a good point. You couldn't see that, because he would be the trees. He would be the rocks. He would be what's called pantheism. He would be everything and in everything, instead of having created everything. What makes us separate from the rest of creation?
That he cares.
Well, that may be true.
Our free will.
The
That's
breath
true
of
too.
God.
Made in his image.
Made in his image. Is that we're made in his image, which characterizes everything else. The free will, the breath of God. We have all these are significant. And so we're separate from his creation, and then God for the rest of creation, and God is separate from creation.
So would you say that's innate godly wisdom? Because we're made in his character, yet there's sin that covers it, so it's difficult to...
Sin gets in the way.
Yeah.
I don't know if it covers it or not, but
Okay.
it gets in the
It
way.
complicates it.
Yeah, it truly does complicate it. It's still, sin gets in the way and says, what is man that's mindful of him? What is man that God is mindful of him? And sin gets in the way and says, so apparently he's not, because if he was, then he wouldn't let all these things happen. See, this is godly wisdom. I'm not sorry, that's worldly wisdom. So I'm glad you all corrected me on that.
I'm
That's
confused for a
good.
minute there.
Yeah.
As long as it's just for a minute, ain't
Yeah,
All right.
I knew you'd come back
I
around.
appreciate that. So how does the Enlightenment of the 18th century still thrive today? Oh,
It doesn't thrive today.
Oh, it does. It still thrives.
I think that
New age
that's,
stuff?
oh.
It's come to that direction.
I think that that's what's being taught in, I don't know, maybe 98% of the colleges, even some Christian colleges, the Enlightenment as far as knowledge becomes God, but God is not allowed to be,
Yeah, he's not allowed to be God.
Exactly, he's not allowed to be God.
Well, of sorts.
Is that the environmentalists?
Yeah, that has a lot to do with it. Save the planet. I was watching the
Tree huggers.
news the other day when it talked about how Kroger has done a really bold thing. They call it a bold thing. It's like, they're not going to use plastic bags anymore, and that's a bold thing.
Yeah, excuse me, they just changed the plastic.
Yeah.
So what?
A different type of
Yellow.
So a different type of plastic?
They changed them back though, I mean, well, how are you gonna get your groceries home?
In order to save the
Well,
planet, see, so it's that way, yes.
Well, I'm sure you've seen this, well, I saw the documentary years ago, I thought I shared it with you, about all this soup out in the ocean, these plastic stuff.
Yes, that just.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's like-
that stuff does happen, but is a plastic bag going to destroy the earth? See,
It
and
doesn't
who owns this earth?
Determines that.
That's right, and so it's the difference between godly wisdom and worldly wisdom,
Right.
is that God has this thing worked out.
Okay, I have a question.
I hope I have an answer.
All right, God owns the earth, God is the creator of the earth. However, how then do you reconcile that Satan is the prince of this world?
He used to be. He's called the prince of this world, but Christ, because of the death on the cross, has dethroned him. And he's been cast down to this earth, as you read in Revelation. It says, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, for for the enemy, the devil, the serpent, has come down to the earth, to the
Right.
inhabitants.
So he's,
He doesn't own it anymore because Christ bought it back with his blood.
okay, all right, so, okay, so then ultimately I know that Satan has no power. However, it's pretty obvious that he's active.
Oh, sure he
And
is.
it's pretty obvious that things happen every day against God's will.
Mhm.
And is all of that put under the category of our free will?
You mean, everything that's happening? Yeah, we're
Everything
choosing
that
to live
people
how we
do.
live, yeah. Even as Christians, we choose how to live how we live. We can listen to the enemy or we're not listening to the enemy, yeah. So that he's still, it says, and the scripture says he knows his time is short.
But he can't do anything unless God allows it.
Yeah.
Unless we
Okay.
eventually.
Well,
So he's no longer the prince of the earth, but he is still here active doing his dirty work.
yeah, he's still carrying on something awful, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that scripture, I was thinking it was 1 Corinthians 13, actually. We look through a glass darkly, but then face to face, so that we are looking through this world darkly. I just modified it. So it was where we look through it darkly, and then the day comes, we'll see face to face, and then it infers that you will know. You will have knowledge then, and understanding. You won't have to stand in a long line a gazillion miles long to ask your question. So make sure you get them written down so you can get them answered. The enemy is allowed to go right now unfeathered. He can untethered. He still can do whatever he unfeathered. Yeah, I said that wrong. He can still do what he wants.
Yeah, I was going to say C.S. Lewis conveyed that so well in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah.
When he has the white witch who is proclaiming to be the queen of Narnia, and yet it turns out she really wasn't. She had established her counterfeit kingdom, and even when Aslan came back, who was symbolic of Christ, she was still doing her evil and her manipulations, but he was still in control.
Yeah.
And in the book, there's a scene where she is confronting Aslan and trying to appear all powerful, and he roars at her. In the book, she runs away. But I love the interpretation of the movie and the way this was handled. When he roared at her, she's standing, and she got this look on her face, like the realization is hitting her, and she just sits down.
Mm-hmm.
So she's still trying to give that portrayal of power and control.
Mm-hmm.
But Aslan is, and that's the way Lewis was portraying all of these biblical principles.
That's a great example.
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's what Satan's all about, is control, right?
Yeah, I'd say,
So
and
when I think of
deception.
the environmentalists, they're trying to control people's lives, tell them how they should live, what they can do, what they can't do. They're even making laws that you can't do certain things and, stuff like that.
Yeah, in the name of
That's
protection
awesome.
and safety and
Yeah.
save the planet and so on.
Yeah,
As Al Gore drives his jet.
yeah.
While he contemplates.
I was going to say, in Genesis, God does give us the mandate to take care of creation, to care for it.
Okay, but to what extent does he give it to us to care for it? And can I save the planet?
No, I'm not saying we can
Oh, you're
save it,
not?
but
Okay.
I'm
Oh gosh, we got a tree order.
we still have a God-given mandate
I think the word is
to do creation care.
Gives us dominion, yes.
Yes,
He
dominion.
gave us dominion in the garden, but we gave it up the day we ate the fruit.
But like the Department of Natural Resources, it's how do we steward that? How do we manage it?
How do we manage it?
Well, that's I think there's a healthy balance there.
There's got to be.
So we
Oh,
eat
yeah,
food,
there is,
but do we decimate it? What's sustainable?
It's not trees anymore, it's climate change. It changes all
We
the
don't
time.
have the power to change the
Oh, no.
My heart's beating really fast here because I know that I am a minority here.
Oh, you might be.
No, you're not.
We were given reign over animals.
Mhm.
We would not want to do something that causes harm to animals.
That's true.
Plastic bags take up to 1,000 years to decompose.
Has somebody actually tracked that?
Yeah,
They've actually tracked somebody who lived 1,000 years ago.
Microplastics, because plastic bags haven't been around, but we know the same scientists that would provide you care for cancer are have the same minds as the people who have figured out what we're using to make things. If we have the ability to care for animals and the planet in a better way, why wouldn't we want to?
I'm not disagreeing with you to take care of things. I'm not saying we need to be slobs and just let things go as they go. But I also recognize that I can't save the planet. And nor is God's planet. It's His creation. It will run its time, and then it will be over. And I have no control over that. But I can take care of what I can take care of. But I can't
have control.
I have no control over what happens to this planet. That's in God's hands.
We do to an extent.
A small extent.
Right, but does that mean that if we can't do the whole thing?
No, don't hear me. Don't hear me as being all or nothing, because I'm not. I'm going to clean my house, and I'm going to take care of what I need to take care of, and I'll drive a car that doesn't put out the pollutions. But consider, too, the same scientists, there are other scientists who are also saying, wait a minute, the pollutions, it is limited to a small area, and the gas, we're talking about cars, doesn't even put out 1% of the carbon that they say it does. You know what puts out most of the carbon?
Our voices.
The oceans put out 10%. The earthworms put out like 40%, something awful. And then you got cows that put out all kinds of carbon, put far more carbon than we do. And yet they say we got to stop driving these cars. I didn't mean to get off on this, but it's still the idea of saving the planet, and you have to look at both sides of the argument, because there are scientists who are just as smart as these scientists who are saying this is not, the information they're putting out is not true. Now, plastic bags in the ocean, things like, sure, I don't want that any more than man moon. I'm not saying be carefree about it, but I'm also not saying that I have to watch every little minute thing that I do because I may destroy the planet. That keeps me trapped and locked in. I have no free will then. I have to follow these laws that basically cause me to be afraid that I'm going to destroy this earth, and I don't know what exactly I'm going to do to destroy it.
But we do need to be responsible.
I'm not saying to be irresponsible. If you're hearing me say to be irresponsible, then we all need to leave, because I am not saying that by any stretch of the imagination. I take care of the stuff that I've got, and I keep my house, I keep things clean, I take care of it. It's the idea that
Simple things you can do.
is I have to be careful about going to extremes in either direction. That's why it's called moderate. I'm listening to ultra-conservatives go to extreme. And then I listen to liberals go to extreme. How was that little dance? And I have to be careful that I don't go in either direction. I have to understand that there's certain control, and then there's certain things I can't control. I can't control everything that there is. I can't control the oceans putting out 10% of the carbon.
That's right.
How do I do that? Or earthworms. I don't know. There are certain things, huh? Volcanoes. I mean, they're putting out incredible. I mean, that one in Hawaii is putting out. How do you stop it? And I can't say that all the cycles of the weather are results of climate change, because I don't know all the cycles. I haven't lived thousands of years to know the cycles that go right and left. So I have to be careful about it, because otherwise that will become part of syncretism. I will start to involve that into my faith, and I have to be careful about it. I'm going to be responsible, because God didn't give me dominion, but He didn't make it so restrictive that I can't breathe. There still has to be some movement about, because He gave me freedom, and He did that through His perfect love. Miles?
Well, I kind of struggle with it too, because it's kind of, you take a city like Pittsburgh that used to just be shrouded in smoke because of all the mills and everything.
Well, I say it does do harm to our lungs and the like.
Nobody in here would want to just dump sewage into the Ohio River.
And I'm not advocating that either.
Right. But isn't it kind of like the Dave Ramsey debt snowball? You take care of the smallest debt first. I mean, I don't think getting rid of plastic straws is going to save the planet.
Okay. I have to understand I can start with small things, but what's my goal? See, I got to understand where I'm headed to. But when things begin to get dictated without real evidence, That's where I have trouble. The scientists you're talking about also have counter scientists who are just as smart, who are saying the opposite of what these guys. Now, who am I going to believe?
Right.
This is what I have to be careful of. Is that I'm not closing my ears to it, but I'm not going to sit there and say, oh my gosh, like Lucy running around on the planet going, save the planet, quit walking on the planet because you're making it smaller while she's running around on it.
So you're saying we shouldn't put our religious faith in either or?
My faith comes that I have to take care of my little piece of the world. Whether that saves the planet or not, I don't know. But I do what God has asked me to do to have dominion over creation. Otherwise, I have to be careful because I'll begin to take those things and begin to syncretize that into my faith. And I don't think that's part of it. Because if I'm reading Revelation correctly, this world will end in fire. Right. I mean, God is going to destroy it in fire. It is His, but at the same time, it doesn't give me permission to destroy it myself. It just means that I have to be responsible, but I'm not going to go to extremes with that because I'm scared. If we run out of resources, they say, well, we may run out of oil. So we live without oil for how many decades? You know, the internet might go down. Al Gore may be really upset about that. But it's still, it may go down. And so what if it goes down? I live without the internet for how many years of my life? It's actually made it more difficult to live with the internet than it was before. But there are things that I got to understand. All these things can just be synced right into my faith. And I have to be careful with that. Because the Scripture doesn't, it speaks of having dominion. It speaks of taking care of things. But it doesn't speak of save the planet.
There's only one that can do that.
That's only one that can do that. Because otherwise, I think I have the power to do it. And I don't. I have to submit and lean not on my own understanding and acknowledge His ways. Because His ways are not my ways. And what do you do with God who does things like earthquakes? He brings about earthquakes. He does things in volcanoes and things like this that happen in natural order. And when He does that, what does that do? I mean, He's the one that's in charge of the planet. He can bring on what He wants. I can't stop volcanoes. There's no big cork that you're going to put in there that's going to stop that thing.
The Bible
So,
says the earth is groaning.
yes, and it does. In Romans chapter 8, it says all creation groans in expectation. So part of that groaning might be the earthquakes. It might be part of the volcanoes popping their cork. And hurricanes and everything.
I agree, with Amy and also what you said in the sense that we do need to be responsible, if for nothing else, because we are believers, and also, hopefully, we're adults, right?
Yeah.
We live on a state road, and before we can cut the grass or trim it down by the road, we have to do major trash pickup because people don't care. Not everybody, but whoever throws their garbage out thinks nothing of that there are other people that live here and maybe they don't want to pick the garbage up.
Okay, so am I saying not to pick up the trash?
No, I know you're not saying that.
That's good. I'm glad you hear me.
No, but what I am saying is that early in my childhood, and for maybe all of my childhood, you didn't see that. You didn't see people dump their garbage.
Okay, so what sort of influence then has this movement had?
A lack of mindfulness has been created, and people have poor habits that do make an impact.
Well, I think
That could be part of it.
I think it's a complete disrespect for human beings,
That
and
could be part of it too.
we push God out of almost everything.
Okay, so the snapshot can cause you to go to extremes because of whatever it is we try to hide or cover up, and there's the mentality is, and we're going to make people stop this.
Guilt.
And I have to be careful because, well, bigger than that is that we shame, and because I'm loaded with shame, I begin to shame. And what is it? It said the more you criticize people, the worse they get.
What?
That's what Paul talks about. It's a fact. The more you criticize people, the more depressed they get, the more they don't care. And so the more laws you put on people, the more they're inclined to go the other direction. Because in my day, and in the same generation that Tina's grew up in, we didn't throw trash everywhere. It wasn't until we started hearing stuff like this that we started throwing trash everywhere. Because they're telling us we're worthless, we're less than creation, you're a terrible person because you're doing this type of stuff. Well, I get depressed, and then what? I start throwing my trash. I don't really care.
But God is a God of order, and we should respect His authority.
I am not disagreeing with that lick.
So the approach that we've seen has been ineffective with some things, but a lot of what I see is a call to action.
Okay, and I can appreciate that call to action. But I have to be careful of what gospel am I preaching?
That's right.
Because am I preaching the gospel of save the planet, or am I preaching the gospel of Christ, which is save the soul? Because what I've seen is that I've watched people who have been terribly depressed and had no Christ, and their house was so dirty you couldn't even walk through it without wearing a mask. And I've been in some. And then I watched people come to Christ, and I watched them start to come out of that depression, and I watched their house begin to clean up. And they begin to take care of it, and it begins to change. So which comes first, save the planet or preach the gospel of Christ, which then people then become respected? This is what I see.
Christ always comes first.
He does. Completely has to.
And that same principle you see in the school. She took out the 10 Commandments, she took out prayer, you took out the Pledge of Allegiance, and then it degraded.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is how it does. It marginalizes prayer because it doesn't permit God to connect with this world. Now see, you think about save the planet is connecting with this world. I connect with God, and then I have respect for His creation. And that means I have respect for everyone who's created in God's image. Otherwise, if it's save the planet, Josh, you better not do anything to trash this planet out. You useless human being if you do. And now, this is no longer respect for creation, except for the planet.
So the planet trumps me as
It does, because you're the one that's messing it up. And we blame, just like it did in Genesis, everybody who's making a mess out of it.
So that's why we have more homeless?
Yeah, and you have to understand in America, go to Europe. Anybody been to Europe? Not exactly the cleanest place in the world. You go to any place in Europe, you go to the Middle East, anybody been to Iraq?
India.
No. Place smells like a continuous garbage dump. Guys that come back, they're like, they had to get used to it, and it took a long time. By the time they got used to it, their tour was over. It was so bad. Most of the Middle East is like that. Then you go to Israel, and it's clean. You go to the surrounding other countries, and they're not clean. It is, well, what's the difference? It's the God's in the middle of it versus something else.
So typically what you're saying is that it's the belief system, right? What
Belief system has a lot to do with it. Yes, it does.
Even London, England, somebody that lives there now, that used to live in this area, said it's getting really dirty over there.
It is. It gets dirtier and dirtier. Because of the belief systems of the people. And we can do all sorts of stuff to try to save the planet, but who are we talking to? You see, in America, we have a tendency to have conscience about it, but you go around to the rest of the world, it ain't so. It ain't so at all.
Well, I have a comment on where you wrote extremes.
Yeah.
I'm all for creation care. I'm all for, doing my part in trying to take care of creation. But one of the things I'm on, I get periodic emails regarding, environmental issues and so forth. But one thing that I got a few months ago was talking about a river here in the States that has actually been granted, no, I think it's in Australia, sorry. I don't think it's
That's all right, wrong continent, that's all.
Yeah.
Just a few thousand miles difference.
Exactly. But anyway, they have granted that river human status, status like a human being would have. I think the river,
It's crazy.
I don't know, it's to do with indigenous peoples living there. But that makes me think of when God talks about dominion, right? Because then it's getting back to what you were saying with, I'm thinking of even rivers in places like India and other places where, you know, the river is basically, it's like you're supposed to worship that river. So what do you do if you need water? Or, you know, then what takes precedence?
It's no different than the cow in India.
Yeah.
Except the cow is right, the God is riding on the cow's back. And that's why the cow's sacred.
Well, the cow could be a cousin.
That's-
I mean, seriously.
It could be that.
No, seriously.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And people are walking around starving.
But understand that it's like when it turns into human status, it's like it becomes human, now we have to guard it like a human being. This is what they did in the Old Testament. Baal was the god of thunder. He was given human qualities. And Moloch was, and Chemosh, two other horrible gods. The Chemosh was the god of the Sidonians, and Moloch was the god of the Ammonites and the Moabites. And they were given human qualities. You read Jeremiah 49, and you read God's curse on the Ammonites for what they did, and they adopted Moloch. And Moloch becomes a god with human qualities that requires a human sacrifice. And so what's happening slowly but surely is we become sacrifices to creation by our lives and the laws that create fear and create shame. And then live in that shame, and am afraid to do anything. You know, our cars are trashed up because we won't throw anything out, and even in the garbage bins, without throwing something in the garbage bin without thinking, how long is that going to sit in a landfill? So we get to be to where it becomes an extreme in our thinking, and the plastic bag that you close up and give to the trash man. How long is that going to last? It's like the planet now becomes a god. And we've even called it Mother Earth.
Yeah,
Hold on.
So in the marginalizing prayer, is it more that it doesn't permit God to connect, or we're limiting ourselves from connecting with the God who can change us?
Marginalized it because it becomes a god. It's like so we can connect with the God of this world. It basically says it's worthless, marginalizing it, like it's no good. It's yours, and don't impose it on me, and don't like you can't do it in public. Now, I'm not against the Muslims. Don't hear me saying that. Oh my gosh, I've already started one storm already. So it is even in the public schools. Rooms are set aside for Muslims to have their prayer time.
Excuse me?
Oh, yeah. Where the Christian can't even say their prayer hardly around the flagpole anymore.
No.
But yeah, there's rooms that are set aside for their daily prayers, and yet prayer is not even supposed to be on campus, but yet here it is. So there is prejudice, and there is favoritism and all that, but it comes with the belief system. What is that belief system? But the snapshot wants everything to be fair. And yet at the same time, it's not, because it is prejudice. Yeah. Tony.
okay, I think I was going to say two things. One thing is, every time somebody refers to Mother Earth, I just cringe.
You do?
Yeah, I do, because to me, that's just like blasphemy to say that. So I cringe. But the other thing about, all these things, the plastic bags and the straws and all these things, yeah, I mean, it is bringing harm to the earth. But it's like you said, we can't, not do anything because we're afraid it's going to, because we ultimately know, the earth is going to be destroyed anyway. I mean, I think it was all unintentionally, some of these things are just leading up to what God said is going to happen in the end anyway. And I'm like you, I'm not saying we shouldn't care about it and we shouldn't try to not do those things, but we can't be so focused on it that, that's our focus rather than,
It becomes a crusade. It becomes another kind of crusade. And I have to understand that there's a balance. Can I stop all pollution?
No.
Can the world stop, can everybody in the world stop all pollution? Because I can't. It is, but I can stop it in my little world, I reckon, as best I can. But again, I'm gonna put something in a trash bag, and I'm gonna set it out with the garbage man who's gonna take it to a landfill, and it's still gonna go to a landfill. It's like, you can't get around this.
No.
And you know how much carbon the landfill puts out. They used to have a flame up there to burn off the methane.
Well,
Because it has,
now they catch it and send it off so you can use it for gas.
so they can use it for something else. Now they're recycling it.
The reason all these things happen is because there are people on this earth. If we weren't on this earth, all those things wouldn't be happening. If it was an uninhabited.
Oh, you mean if we weren't here, yeah, there's naturalists who want everything to go back to nature.
Yeah, but it seems like God put us here, and He created us in
He sure
His
did.
image. So
And what's the enemy want to do?
He wants us to feel like, we're messing everything all
And
up.
what he wants to do, he wants to make us slaves. Slaves to the foolishness.
And God knew when He put us on this, He knew these things were going to be. It's not a surprise to Him that we've got a lot of plastic bags that are.
No, it's not really shocking him. Nothing's occurred to him, and I'm sure he's made provision for that. Like,
Yeah.
What comes to my mind a lot of times when you hear these extremists on the, different things, is that you shouldn't think more highly of yourself than you ought, because we don't have the power to destroy this planet. God created it. If it's going to be destroyed, He's going to be the one to do it. And I'm not saying, I agree with all the, keeping things cleaned up and all that. I'm not, but people that saying that if you don't drive this electric car, then you're going to destroy the planet. Well, where do you think that electricity comes from?
how much does that electric car cost?
I know. And where's the electricity comes from? It comes from natural gas. That has to produce
$60,000.
the
Everybody got $60,000 to buy one of them things. And it's
just stuff like that is what I think.
And and nuclear electricity. But there's so many things. One is a contradiction against the other. So where are we then?
Mm-hmm.
We're cornered, you might say. There's just so much that you can do. Miles, you have your hand up, or?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there's two things. I think what you're trying to say is we should worship the Creator instead of the creation.
You mean like it says in Romans?
Yeah.
Romans
Right.
chapter 1, where it says they worship and serve the creature more than the Creator, which is what you see.
Correct. So, but then the other thing is unlike previous generations, we could destroy this planet. I mean, if there was a nuclear war, we may not destroy it completely, but unlike past generations, I mean, if there was an all-out, let's, strike, counter-strike, strike, whatever, I mean, we do have...
You have a capacity to that, yeah.
We do have the capacity to quickly destroy things to a spot where no one can really imagine.
And they talked about how that you couldn't live in a certain area for like 20 or 30 years, something like that. Nagasaki and Hiroshima, they dropped A-bombs on those, or atom bombs, correct? And those were nuclear weapons. And they lived back there within about 5 to 10 years at the most, and the place is now thriving. And they would talk about nuclear winter and all this time. There was no nuclear winter.
But the bombs now are, I mean, those are like matches, I mean, they're just like little teeny firecrackers.
So you got a bigger bomb. It may take a little longer for things to restore, but it's not quite the way that they're only predicting. How many have they tested out in Nevada, or in the Arizona desert? And yet, where's the winters? Where are the things that they've tested?
I think the winter comes in and when it's an all-out,
I suppose.
all or nothing at all.
But understand that this is the type of stuff of worldly thinking that comes right into Christianity that creates fear. And what's the enemy about?
Fear.
It's exactly what he's about, and he does it well. And because we go off and we crusade with another gospel. What is it that Paul talked about in Galatians? The people would have a different gospel. And this becomes another gospel. Save the Planet is going on, well, for all future generations. as though, how many are there going to be? I don't know. And how many have there been before me? And people have done the same type of thing, pollution. And something about, in the Bible, it's inferred that people in the time of the Old Testament, the stuff that they did was detestable and polluted their world. And they still survived it.
I just have a question. I want to go back to the snapshot, if that's okay. You had the extreme, and then we hide, and then the shame, and when you shame people or correct people, you know, you should, we get to the point of, I don't care. So my question is...
In other words, depression, go ahead.
The don't care thing, leaving out chemical depression, okay? The don't care thing, I think that starts, even if there isn't a major snapshot as like a toddler, I'm looking at just growing up and maybe upper elementary, middle school. Is it a protective, that's what I'm asking, is it a protective? If you stripped away the don't care, would there be the wounds underneath? Because isn't the don't care another excuse? I mean, we allow ourselves not to care, we cause ourselves not to care because we don't want to hurt.
That's part of it, but understand that don't care is the direct result of being shamed. My snapshot basically put a lot of shame on me. Now how many times have you all been guilted in your home by your parents? Well, you better do that, or, I mean, you're gonna, okay, so how well, so, how good was that motivator? How good was it, and how long did that motivator last? As long as they were in the room, and then I might put it, or I might, now, I was combing my hair, was in the 8th grade, and I can't think of the name of the nun, I can still see her. And she talked, and when she did, she spit. And so she was combing my hair, and she said, "You'll be embarrassed doing that one day, if you do that in public. Do you know I can't comb my hair in public today because of that one comment?" I was shamed out of it. And so when I think about it, I actually get a little sullen over that. Now, am I going to start combing my hair in public? Probably I don't really care. But it was, I don't care about that. But anything that's motivated out of guilt and shame doesn't last. Now, you can say, well, that lasted. Okay, great, it's combing my hair. But look what it does to you. If it creates depression when I say don't care, there's a difference between don't care and depression. Only, okay, you know, somebody thinks bad about me, I don't really care. But at the same time, my don't care in my history was depression. That's don't care / depression, because that's what it creates. When you live in constant fear, that's what, look at Adam and Eve. When they were hiding, said they were full of shame, and they were hiding. Why were they hiding?
Because of the fact that they were in the first place told.
I know what they did. Why were they hiding? What was the emotion behind it? They were afraid. They were afraid. They were living in this fear. And then God steps up and he says, "What have you done?" Okay, and they talk about what he did. And then he offers salvation and encouragement. He didn't shame them. He said, "Well, you better act right. You better do right, boy, you did." He didn't do that. He encouraged them along the way and gave them salvation, gave them a hope. And when I think about the extremes of any, even in Christianity, where there's an extreme and guilt and shame is the motivator, it offers no hope. We constantly live in fear of, do I turn left or do I turn right? And that, what direction do I go? I'm not free to live. So Christ says, "I've come to give you life that you may have it to the full." That doesn't mean I get to go out and do what I want and trash the world, but it gives me a conscience and allows me to live free. But the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. So, and in his stealing, he gives and creates fear any way that he can to lock me up. And that's what these folks did. The Enlightenment takes it, this is now enlightenment. And I'll tell you that one of the things that I have seen is that things extremes like environmental stuff, and I am not knocking on it because there has to be some responsibility. But what I watched it turn into is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's what started out as a good cause has become something that people have used now to rip off folks like you and me.
So it's interesting because this right here is denying God's power. And that's
Yeah, I was
what
also gonna say that.
It does.
Yeah.
And that's what this does.
And
This
that's
denies God's power as something that's separate from our creation. Everything has to be in our creation. That's,
I don't think we realize how easily we get obsessed with something, and that could become a demigod.
that's exactly what, and that's what the
Yeah.
snapshot teaches is obsession. We become obsessed with something. One obsession is, what if you find out about my life? Well, that can take up a cause to hide that and make it look like I'm doing really good. I mean, I don't know that, I mean, it is like, we're talking about Al Gore riding on his plane is just as hypocritical as somebody coming to church and they just watch pornography the night before. It's the same hypocrisy. We're everywhere. I'm as much a hypocrite as anybody.
But then isn't the don't care a shield to protect us from that shame and guilt?
Well, it doesn't really protect us. It's just
No, it doesn't. We just
No.
think it does.
Well, it's an illusion.
It's an illusion.
Yeah, and
That's what I mean.
then I can act like I don't really care what anybody thinks.
Yeah, right.
I can act like that.
Or
I mean,
I
I really
really
do.
hurt, yeah.
I mean, the certain people. I mean, what I was gonna say was that there are certain times when when you say that you don't care what people think. You just carry on with what you think is right, and you try to honor God in doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
but
what
I'm
I try to
talking
do is
about
honor
the
God.
don't care as in
Yeah,
protecting yourself.
Yeah, protecting yourself. Yeah,
Yeah.
protecting
But
yourself.
if I'm living free, if I'm reconciling this,
Yeah,
and I'm living free, and I have this mindset, I am freer than my captors. So that's like Viktor Frankl talks about that in Man's Search for Meaning. That's a book he wrote, where he talked about being in the prison camps and Auschwitz and other places that he was transferred to, where he learned to be freer than those who had him captive. He said, they can take away, they can make me force me around, they can take away my life. He said, but they couldn't take my spirit. He said, they couldn't take my happiness. Fear steals. It does nothing but steal from us.
It's the same as Corrie ten Boom.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
Corrie ten Boom,
true.
she still had some, because she saw that guard in church that day, and she still had that, an unforgiveness that would lock her up. And that's part of me thinking I'm in control, when I'm not. Syncretism is quite subtle. And it's like, what's the gospel say? What's the gospel teach? And it is the gospel of Revelation. It's the gospel of freedom. It's the gospel of undoing. It is the gospel that sets me free in this world. And when the world begins to impose their laws in fear and shame in any way, shape, or form, and I begin to acquiesce, then I'm now giving up my freedom to this world. My prayer life cannot be around God has to be the one to save the planet, not me. God has to be the one to save lives, not me. It is me who takes the gospel. It's you who choose, and you choose, or you don't choose. And I hopefully learn how to be a friend, because I'm terrible at being a friend, and want to be a friend to people who don't believe, and if they don't believe, still be their friend instead of abandoning them, because that's what the gospel teaches.
I just wanted to take it back a little bit. Like one specific thing that strikes me is that God said that He would bring a sword to bring division.
Yes, He does.
But now, like, He's a God of mercy. How can He show that mercy towards the world? I mean, He
How
sent.
has He shown that mercy?
I mean, He sent Christ to come here so that He would be able to bring us back to Him, because it's like a win-win situation. Now, that's the only way that you can find joy within yourself. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's how He shows mercy. He showed mercy in Genesis 3:15, because He said, "The day you eat, you will surely die."
Yeah.
And they didn't die. God showed mercy on that day.
Yeah.
But one thing I know is that people that live in fear then start living in a sullen state of depression. We wonder why America has become known as the Prozac Society.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Because we have more depression in this country, and we attribute it to affluence, but it's not all about affluence. It is about stuff that's imposed. I mean, we have come under so many restrictions that we're afraid to do anything.
So are you
So living in fear will create depression. And ultimately people are starting to look for relief. It also brings on brain alteration. When you live in constant fear, you alter your brain. Basically, you start to inflame one part of your brain over another. And when that happens, then you get out of balance. Then you can look like you're psychotic, or you can look like you're bipolar, or you can look like you're borderline, or you can look like you're OCD, or you can run into addictions because your brain's out of whack. Not that you can totally get it into whack, I guess, but you can bring it into a relatively good balance. But you have to understand what's driving it, what brought it there, what was the onset of all that. And most people in their history, you find that they started in a home where things weren't always wonderful. And yet, there are those who suddenly take a left turn or a right turn who come from great homes. And because there's things that go on in the brain that you and I don't even know about. There was a kid who suddenly he was 9 years old and suddenly he started getting rageful. He was a very quiet kid, and they found he had a cyst on the left frontal lobe. And when they removed the cyst, he went back to normal. But there are things that happen in our life. How many years have we been falling apart?
I mean, all of us people?
Since we were created. Since creation, we've been falling apart. What's that?
Entropy.
Entropy, yeah, that's what it is.
No, entropy.
It is, it's entropy.
So
It's a
does
slowly winding down of creation.
Does Prozac create, what do I want to say? When they're depressed like that, you give them the Prozac, so it makes them right again?
It alters your
It can. It alters chemistry. It does alter chemistry in order to bring your depression, take it away. But the circumstances still have to be changed. But look at all the people taking antidepressants and it's not helping them away.
Okay, so I have a question.
Yes, you do. You raise your hand if you have a question.
Sorry. I want to comment.
That's what it's supposed to be, Tina.
Depression.
Yeah.
Okay. If one has worked through, or a lot works through snapshots and is living an emotionally healthy life, and yet without chemical help, they still are having a really hard time functioning. So I'm thinking that the brain falls under everything else, just like our body does. Our brain is under sin as well. So cannot our brains be misfiring without the trauma?
Can, sure.
Okay.
It can indeed.
So how do you tell the difference?
Well, you-
Come back next week.
You may have to go out west to California to get what's called a spectrometer. A spectrometer is a particular instrument that will tell you what part of the brain is getting good blood flow and which are not. Which parts are inflamed, which ones are not. It can actually tell you if your brain is not in balance.
Wow.
Don't we have that here?
Heck if I know. All I know is it's out in California.
Have you been to California?
You can probably do it here, but you have to have people that know how to do
Have you
it.
been there?
I'm thinking there's one here.
There might
What
be.
you were just
You've been there,
Yeah.
I'm
Brian?
pretty sure there's one in Texas.
There probably is,
California
but-
Oh, wait a minute,
syllables.
we forgot. the
Dang.
mysticisms
He said
and the,
California.
you know, the places you go
Nice syllables,
to get
yeah,
yourself in balance.
What?
The mysticisms. where you-
Mysticisms.
Yes, places you go in the world, where you can get your back in order.
You think you can.
Yeah,
But
I think that's
Get
It's
your
a-
chakras in line.
Again, it goes back to belief systems. And because there's something that alters the brain, rather that's a cyst, or something, or an aneurysm, or something or a tumor that can cause personality change, or an auto accident, or brain injury, things like this that can cause personality change. And then there's this. And these things cause a change from innocence to feeling nothing but shame and guilt and depression and being susceptible to fear on a regular basis. Yeah. Nancy.
I just read today where the serotonin is changed in the brain by drinking beer or whiskey or something like that.
Changed in what way?
Well, I wish I could remember the exact sentence, but I don't.
In a good way?
It actually
Shucks, I'm gonna go drink beer.
I think it causes it to deplete, doesn't
Probably.
it? And so you have to have serotonin to be happy.
You do, and at the same time, I think you use a lot of dopamine up when you drink alcohol, and at the same time, then it also brings the walls down, and people will start saying stuff, and they'll stop at it, and then when they get sober, they're like, "Oh, did I say it last night?" I'm entirely sure. Yeah. And drug addiction and alcoholism, as well as being a Prozac society, everything is on the up. Why?
Well, why do they keep them on the medicine after they're, like you were talking about, Tina, where they've resolved everything?
Not
they
supposed
feel
to.
fine?
Not supposed to. Those drugs were never intended to take for the rest of your life.
Yeah, but
But
that's
it's
what they tell
become
them.
that way.
That's what they tell them, you
Yeah.
have to take it all your life.
No, it's like there's things that change, and you test it, because this is not a perfect science. So you get on it for a while, then you get off. And if it comes back, then you get on it again, and then you stay on it a while, and then you get off, and find out what's going on.
Well, it's that enslavement to the foolishness.
It is.
So it never really gets to the root.
Yeah.
It never really changes
So
our
then you
heart.
would be fearful if you went off that you would go back to that state.
That's a fact. You could be afraid of it, or you could be courageous and come off of it and find out you're all right. It could be that too.
Wouldn't it have to do with, trying to crave for something that you see and value in the world? That
Sure
that-
could, yeah. One thing you'll never get rid of is sinful nature.
Right.
I don't care how much you alter it. I mean, I listen to these CDs by Dr. Amen.
Yes.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he talks about that, and it's very, very true. What he finds out, but what he talks about is evolution too. And it's like, okay, you don't have an understanding of the simple nature, because now this kid is now this fun-loving kid because you got his brain chemistry back in life, but it doesn't save him. It doesn't bring you to the knowledge of the truth about the gospel. So it's nice, and it's good for them, and it's good for the people around them, but it's not always going to change them. So simple nature is one thing you'll never get rid of. So we're in quite the dilemma. But living in fear is one of those things that we have to be cautious of, because we start adapting the world's way of thinking, and it becomes syncretistic. And when it becomes syncretistic, it becomes confusing as well, and it becomes fearful.
But the only thing that casts out is love.
That's a fact, and that's the perfect love of God, and that brings His perfect peace into this world, and that the peace that passes all understanding, which means no matter what happens in this world, it's just going to be there, no matter what it is. All right, I mentioned a couple weeks ago that we're about to wind up this study, which has taken us about a year, I guess. And so I've asked that if you will think about what you would like to study next, questions or whatever you'd like to do. I'm open to your feedback for that. And
So there's nothing else to add to this?
I'm not finished yet. I'm sure there's plenty more to add to it. Yeah. So appreciate you bringing that up, Debbie. Yeah.
No, I mean, it just keeps like, it's like one thing, and then it goes into another, and it all kind of,
It helps.
is all together.
It makes me understand better what I pray for. It helps me understand my belief systems. And as I pray for God to undo those belief systems. So it's like Paul the Apostle believed after he had these revelations, and he has all this pain, and he's struggling with this thorn in his flesh that if I ask God, He'll take it away. So he asks God 3 times, and it doesn't get taken away. It changes his belief system. Now it comes to when I'm weak, that's when I'm strong. That the power of Christ may rest on me. Yeah, and that changes the belief system. That's what I mean by undoing. Things change as we go along. And my prayer life has changed as I've gone along. It's moving from the superficial to wow, what's really going on in life? What's really happening around me? What's happening to this world I live in, and the people I live in, to where I began to care more for them. And seeing people created in God's image and getting rid of my cynicism and my sarcasm. It's not gone, but it's better. And understanding how that's a roadblock to my faith.
I just have one quick thing. I was reading 2 Kings this week, and this passage struck me, and it said he was talking about the Israelites worshiping idols, and it said they chased and worshipped useless things until they became useless themselves.
That's what they do.
Yeah, and I underlined that because I'm like, geez Louise, it does take everybody just down.
The gospel of extremes leaves you having to live a life without making a mistake or getting caught at it. It does not give you any freedom whatsoever.
We're not perfect.
No. And so if you get caught doing something contrary to whatever gospel you believe, then you will find yourself being criticized or feeling bad or guilty or feeling shame or whatever it might be. Just as though there can be no mistakes.
I just want to say one thing. There's been a lot of topics we've covered in here this morning. And if you feel like you're attacked or closed off, I just want to challenge you to open up and remain. Because as we continue to engage things that are hard for us, we're challenged, just like with Paul with the thorn in the flesh. But if you close off and then just isolate because of something that might have been said this morning, that's not from God, to isolate and close off. So I just really want to encourage you to remain instead.
To add to that, what I'm after in this is for people to think. I'm not here to indoctrinate. I will go to extremes because I'm just as capable of that as anybody. And my goal in my life is to come to a place of moderation where I begin to look at life as, okay, there are extremes. And that I'm looking at life with more of a balance in hopes that I look at it more through the lens of Christ, who sees this is not as black and white as we think it is. That there is some color in this. And that there are some things to it that are not like we think it is. And I pray for that. that as I pray, I understand people have this stuff, and it's not just like we can't come to Christ robotically. We bring this stuff with us. And we bring everything in our lives comes into relationship with God, and then God begins to undo that. And that's part of my prayer life is, God, you have to show me this world the way you see it, so that I can better serve it. Because if I do it the way that I do it, then I won't serve it well.
So we bring all the baggage and he helps unpack it.
He does unpack it, yes. He helps to unpack it. No, not that one. Yeah.
Hey.
I got the key. Yeah, I got the key. That's what we do. And it is allowing God to do this, and that means that I have to undo my inability to trust. And my trust, God is not looking at it like you better trust or else, boy. He's looking at it as, take your time. I'm with you. And I know your intention is to move it. And he has far more patience than I am. And I appreciate that. Okay, so think about what you want to do. I don't know, I can't say when we'll start the next round, but we'll find out. So I'd just like to get your feedback on what you're thinking about. All right, let's pray. Our Lord Jesus, thank you so much for your great kindness and mercy to us. I pray, Father, you do bring balance to our lives, because we are human and we sin and we make mistakes. We fall flat on our face, but I pray, Father, we'll get up. We'll get up and we'll look up and we'll keep walking and keep moving and keep growing and keep getting to know you, the Creator, and take this great message of mercy and kindness to others. Give us that urgency to do something instead of nothing. I praise you and I bless you, Lord. I pray our lives are blessed. I pray our lives are worship to you. In Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.